Welcome to Cultural Catalyst, the podcast that shines a light on the creative visionaries working behind the scenes in arts and entertainment. I'm your host, Alison McNeil, CEO and founder of McNeil Creative Enterprises. With over 20 years of experience advocating for equity and sustainable growth in the arts and entertainment, I've seen firsthand the power of the behind-the-scenes creatives. Here on Cultural Catalyst, the creatives behind the curtain take center stage. Let's celebrate the people who make the magic happen. Let's dive in. Hey there. Before we dive into this episode, I want to take a moment to acknowledge the shifts in our arts and cultural landscape since these conversations were first recorded. We've seen the challenges to institutions, including the arts, but we also have seen the resilience of creatives and cultural organizations. If you believe in the power of the arts, now is the time to take action. Support the artists and arts organizations that inspire you. Donate, amplify their work, and stay engaged. Visit Americans for the Arts to stay updated on advocacy efforts happening on Capitol Hill and across the country. Americans for the Arts provides resources and opportunities to get involved at the local, state, and national levels. We'll link their website in the show notes and continue sharing updates on our MCE Instagram. As the legendary Carrie Mae Weems reminds us, art is the one place we all turn to for solace, and we need that now more than ever. Let's show up for the arts, for our communities, and for each other. Now, let's get into this episode. Today, I'm excited to welcome my guest, Jennifer Bowman. Jennifer Bowman is Houston Grand Opera's Director of Community and Learning. After 5 years shaping music education at the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C., Jennifer moved back to her hometown to lead Houston Grand Opera's Community and Learning Division. Since 2007, this division has been celebrated for its incredible work, bringing together schools, families, and community organizations to create enriching experiences for all. Jennifer's passion for building collaborative partnerships is at the heart of her mission to make opera and music more accessible to everyone. With over 15 years in arts administration championing equity in classical music, Ms. Bowman has prioritized initiatives that promote engagement, fostering belonging, and inclusion in the field. Welcome, Jennifer, to the show.
Thank you, Allison. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
I'm so excited about having you share your journey and helping to elevate the idea that there are so many ways you can work in creative fields. This podcast is all about giving flowers to those who work behind the scenes, because we know with your collaboration, we would not experience what we do in the audience. So I cannot wait to hear more from you. So let's start with what first sparked your interest in music.
I will say there are two sparks that I always tell people about. One actually goes a generation before me. My mom was raised in Houston during the civil rights era, and it was always important for my grandmother, regardless of the fact that she grew up in Fifth Ward, Houston, to experience things. So my grandmother would take my mom to square dancing if they were able to go to a concert. So for my mom, it was always important to have arts in her life, even though she became an RN. So when I was born, my mom was taking me to the symphony, the Black theater company in town, the ballet, or the opera, just because it became part of our life. So it's always been something that's been important to me. At a very early age, I decided I wanted to sing and play the violin. I was a terrible pianist, and I was in theater. These were all parts of my life. Of the first part, I always tell people this story. When I was graduating from high school, about to go off to college, a family friend asked me to come and talk to some teenagers who were part of a mentoring program that she did at Texas Southern University. I didn't know what to say to those kids, but I told them about what my interests were, and they told me, wow, we've never been to those places that you're talking about. I've never been to the opera. I've never been to the symphony. I've never even been to any of the theaters in town. In the back of my brain, I was like, it shouldn't be that way. Then I went off to college. It's definitely always been a part of my life as an audience member, as a practitioner, as something I've done in community with other people. So it remains very important to me.
I appreciate both of those reasons because they do inform your why. Whenever it is tough to get through a day, it's like, let me remember why I'm here. And, those that don't have access are always at the forefront of my mind when I think about the work that we do. When you think about music and classical music and music education at that in classical music, why music education instead of singing or playing the violin?
I think they are all part of each other. I don't like to delineate. I went to a regular public school in the Houston area, and you would learn about all types of music. You would play the recorder, but you'd also listen to classical music, but you'd also learn about all of the types of instruments. So, in that way, you were exposed to so many things and then able to make a choice on, okay, what am I going to listen to? What am I going to hate? What am I going to play? Or if you're not going to do any of those things, what else am I going to do in life? For me, music education is really about the exposure and enrichment that you can get from all different types of music, whether it's singing, whether it's listening to voices. It's really about how do you use those things to enrich your life and also enrich education, obviously.
Does a typical day look like for you at Houston Grand Opera?
Well, there is no typical day. But what I always tell people, and I think I put this on my LinkedIn, is that I'm an arts programmer thinking about how to make art inclusive, how to make sure as many people as we can involve in it are involved in it. So in that case, that's always in the back of my mind, whether or not I am trying to raise money to make sure we get people to see a show or that we can bring something out into the community or working on pulling demographics or doing research to support philanthropy or marketing efforts or programs in general. Everything that I'm doing from an administrative, a managerial, a leadership level always has that in the back of my head. The wonderful part is in the midst of budgeting and all these fun things that are not always fun for people, there are these opportunities where you can remember why you're doing what you're doing. Next week, we're doing our touring opera production. It's a 45-minute show called Opera to Go that we do every season. We're doing 3 days of performances at this outdoor public space in Houston called Miller Outdoor Theater. I want to see who comes. I want to see how they enjoy it. I want to see the donors who are supporting it, what their opinions of it are. Everything that it took to get this production here on the stage, this is the reason this is a product. So it's really nice to be able to, after a long journey, and this production has been in consideration for about 18 months. So after that type of long journey, we can see the fruits of our labor.
Does that mean you work with the artistic director to identify the best ways to engage community based on what you're doing, or how do you decide what type of engagement to do?
Well, for this department, I am the artistic director, which is
Okay.
a big privilege. The piece that we're performing, it's two short operas based on books by famed author and illustrator Mo Willems. One of the operas is one that I commissioned when I worked at the Kennedy Center and always said it needed to have a life beyond that first production. And another was commissioned right after I left the Kennedy Center. Bringing it to Houston, I decided that I wanted to translate the libretto, translate the text into English and Spanish, so it's a bilingual production. We worked with Willems and we worked with the composer Carlos Simon to make all these changes to the text and the score so that we could put this on beginning this season. The production opened last week and it will run through May for us. So a lot of opportunity to connect with the community and also on a very popular book. I didn't know about these books because I don't have any kids until a few years ago. But talking to librarians, talking to parents, they're really excited and asking how they can bring it to their community. And again, that's the point. We chose this one because it could be accessible both in subject matter and in language.
Wow. Yeah, I brought my nephew to see Mo Will at the Kennedy Center, and I had no idea who he was, but there were so many kids It was like a field trip, and
Yeah.
I just didn't know I was walking into it.
I know he is the Mr. Rogers of his generation, and he worked at Sesame Street, and he has aged special. Like, he's a really big deal, especially in the young kids sect.
So I heard you mention you were artistic director for this piece, but then also planning and budgeting and all of the other things that I heard you mention as a part of your job. So you're doing both two distinct roles, and how do they complement each other? When you're thinking about other people that want to do this work, how might they get into either?
I'll say, just full disclosure, I have these roles to think about artistic excellence and also fiscal, cultural excellence in this programming, but I'm working within a really big organization by opera standards and can utilize the opera's artistic director, Patrick Summers, to get advice, or the music staff, the artistic staff, our finance department, philanthropy department, all of these important departments supporting the work. But when it comes to the nitty gritty, it's my responsibility to make sure all the things happening in our department are coming together with the support of the team that works with me specifically, or the other departments, or our community partners.
That's really interesting because, one of the things that I've heard from different people over the years is if you're artistic, you're in that lane and that's what you do. If you're administrative, that's where you lie. But it sounds like for you, you get the value of both and being able to marry the two.
Yeah, actually, I've heard that a lot in my career, and I have a very good mentor who I won't mention their name. But when I told them after I left a job early in my career and said I was really interested in thinking about how classical music and communities connect, I was going in that direction for a while. And then I wanted to become an executive director someday, or managing director, leader. I was told that's not the route that people take, but it was important to me. So what I've been doing my whole career has kind of been a prove them wrong situation.
Yes.
You can integrate community. You can think about how education is a part of what you do and still be successful. I won't pretend, though, when I'm talking to people or when I've previously interviewed for executive positions, they see a lot of community education on your resume, and it's like, how are you qualified for this? But then they learn that you've done fundraising. They learn that you've started an entire program. They hear about all the connections you have in the industry. So I always tell young people, it really is about just gaining the skills that you're going to need for whatever your goal is. And also, fun fact, we are training young people for a future we don't know. So the skills we think are necessary may not be necessary, and there might be new skills. Get to know people, talk to people who are doing the work that you want to do, learn what they did. Sometimes they had very unconventional paths that didn't always go the route. Sometimes the meritocracy wasn't so meritocratic. It's important to know that those different paths exist, and honestly, that there's not one path to get there.
Thank you so much for saying that. This theme is something that continues to show up in everyone we've spoken with so far. That is, if there's a linear path or your path is varied, all that you experience informs what you end up working on or how you end up working. There's so much value in being able to use both sides of your brain. If someone was interested in doing what you do, how would they get prepared? What are the key skills and traits that are needed to be effective in the work that you do?
I always say to people, there are three things that got me here when it comes to those key strengths. First, it's that I was a performer or a creative and had a real understanding of the art forms that I wanted to be a part of. Even when I wasn't performing it, when I didn't get that far in the theater world, obviously, I didn't get that far in the opera world, but there's the familiarity, which helps me as a person that works with different art forms, not just classical music, to understand, or at least have a base understanding of what is happening. Then there's this part about the administrative roles, and it really cannot be underestimated how important that is, not just for understanding what to do in the job, but if you want it to be sustainable, if you want to grow, just having an understanding of budgets, basic finance. Can you talk about things in a descriptive, concise way, whether it's for marketing purposes or philanthropic purposes, or just writing to share with people what you're doing. Being able to do that, being able to just write and message is such an important part of the role. And then the third thing is being okay with talking to strangers. I think I'm an extroverted introvert. It feels like theater when I'm out in the world. And then I need to come off stage at the end of the day and not talk. But just being able to ask people questions and trying to figure out, what path did you take? What do I need to know? How did you do that? Well, you're doing something that I don't know, it's new. How do I learn how to do that? Just being able to take those risks, both from an action perspective and a person perspective, is so important. I think those are ways you find out, no, I don't want to go this way. I do want to go this way. I don't like this art form. I never ever want to fundraise. I want to do all the other things. That's the way you find out, is just by experiencing all those things and getting in the information you can.
When you think about your journey and the different things that you did, which ones were like, oh, yes, I want to continue and follow this path, or no, I don't want to do that?
Yeah, there are a few that I always talk about. When I was undergraduate, I came in as a government major because that felt like something my family would be proud of. At some point, I just realized I wanted to do music. So I got a degree in music. And then as I was graduating, two of my teachers in my major were like, Jennifer, we know you don't know what you want to do next. We think you should stay here for another year, work, keep studying voice, and think about what the possibilities are for you. And I trusted them. They really were looking out for me. So I stayed a year. I worked the off season for summer camp. I worked in a music library. I taught voice to kids. I was taking voice lessons. I started auditioning for grad schools. And that type of gap year, if you will, was just so important and really focused me. The next one is I went to music conservatory for grad school. So it's very traditional, classic training college or art school. Often a lot of them that have been around for a long time might have been a place where like high schoolers would have learned, or college students, obviously. But really the focus is on the arts. It hasn't been until recently that a lot of them are starting to integrate more arts management, other skills, business skills into the learning. It was really a place where you were going to focus on performance, or composition, or just something that's really related to the creative part of the arts, and go out into the world and be wonderful. I went there for grad school. It was a 2-year program. The class that really changed my life was taught by a man who was the former manager for the Pointer Sisters. His name is Bill Nuremberg. I think he's still teaching Peabody in Baltimore. He taught a class called The Business of Music, and it talked about all of the other things that are possible working in the arts. And I was, whoop, like truly changed my life and had me thinking, why am I in these voice classes and doing this coaching when this is the thing that I'm living for every day? Truly, every time I was taking one of those classes. So I asked him to help me. He ran an agency, a talent agency for students, Peabody students or alumni, really trying to get them out into the world. So I came and I worked for him part-time there, doing press packets, writing things, just trying to learn from him. And when I graduated from school, I realized, no, I don't want to be a performer. Let me figure out what needs to happen in my life with this administration part of it. I wish at that point in time, it almost felt like a failure to leave grad school and not be singing at the Metropolitan Opera. And so there's also a part of me at that time that really shied away from any performance at all. It's something I regret. I try to rectify in different parts of my life through community choirs and church choirs and some gigging. So I know it's possible, but I think at that time, which is very different from these young people today who are entrepreneurs, performers, like they're doing it all. There was a little bit of shame about leaving and pursuing something else. But Bill was very inspirational. I took 2 years, it was like another kind of gap, and worked in Baltimore, continued taking lessons, started teaching lessons again while I figured out my next steps. I applied for 2 jobs. I applied to work at the Kennedy Center, and I applied to work at Boston Lyric Opera. And I'd gotten the job at the Boston Lyric Opera when I went to interview at the Kennedy Center. I left the interview at the Kennedy Center. They called me immediately, offering me the job. I decided to stay in DC, and that's how my career in arts management really took off. The first position I had there, where I met you, Allison, I was supporting capacity building with arts organizations all over the country. So I always tell people that was my MBA, learning how other arts organizations around the country and around the world worked effectively and efficiently. I was really blessed to be in a job getting paid, getting to meet all these arts leaders and learning at the same time. So yeah, that was the path.
Wow, as you were talking about your varied experiences, I just kept thinking you're open to exploring the unknown and listening to your gut as you think about what you're going to do next, or even wrestling with whether or not you would move forward in certain paths. I think that's all a part of the career journey. I actually think none of it is by mistake, and every part of our journey informs what we're doing right now. It's really helpful to hear the journey that you took. Some people might say, you worked at the Kennedy Center. That's amazing. Did you feel that while working there?
I will say most days I did, some days I didn't. When you're in an office with no windows and just trying to get stuff done. But my gratitude, anytime I walked into the building, and if you've been to the space, you know, you walk into this huge lobby that is, it feels like it's so high in the air. And you look above you, and in one hallway, it's all the flags of the 50 states and territories. If you walk in another hallway, it's all the flags of all of the countries of the world. And it's beautiful, and it's glass, and it's everything. And it's a monument to John F. Kennedy. Oftentimes when I was feeling those moments of, oh, I just got to go to work, I would look up and remind myself, I'm working in this place that's the cultural center. It's dedicated to a man who really thought the arts and culture were important parts of our country, and he supported it. And again, I had the opportunity to share the arts with as many people in the community as possible. I met so many people working at the Kennedy Center, especially during my second tenure. DC natives had never stepped foot in the building. Uber drivers that picked me up didn't know what the building was.
Sitting right outside of it, huh?
I give a lot of Uber drivers tickets. To me, that's a shame. Even again, if you don't like what you see, just see it.
Wow. As you were talking about the work at the Kennedy Center and some of the people that saw you and helped you, I started to think about how important that is on your career journey. No one has all the answers, and being able to feel like you can be vulnerable enough to be unclear about what you want to do and having someone see you and pour into you is so important, especially as you navigate any industry, but definitely creative industries where if you don't know, you don't know. One of the reasons why we have this podcast is sometimes when you think about what it means to work in arts and entertainment, you think about people that you see. Very rarely are you thinking about the people behind the scenes that make it possible for you to come and see or help work directly with the artistic director to think about different ways to market. And, there's just so much that happens behind the scenes. You mentioned something about getting paid or sustainability. And, sometimes people are like, working in the arts, I can't make a living in that way. And I know when I met you, I definitely was like, I'm making a living, but it's barely. So it evolves, right? But it's off careers. Well, maybe not the law, but even medicine, they start out not making as much as they end up making. I'm so glad that you went with your gut and moved to music versus government. What's the most challenging aspect of your work?
That's a really good question. I often think, depending on the situation and the job, so much about what we're doing, whether it's getting audiences through the door, getting people to believe in the program, getting philanthropists to support it, getting press to decide they care enough to market or review it. It's a lot of translating. I'll even go outside of opera. When I worked with the symphony, when I worked with hip hop culture at the Kennedy Center, if you were trying to engage audiences or constituencies that have no knowledge of the art form, you really have to figure out how to share the information about it in a different way, in a way that you don't necessarily have to talk to the fans or the aficionados or the practitioners. It's just really important to get that message across to people. And then I always think about, done a lot of things, but I feel like I can always do more. If something doesn't work out that I was really trying to do for whatever reason. This is for a lot of people in this industry. These are things that are important to us. reasons outside of the financial ones. So it's like if you're dedicating your time to doing something and it's not possible, that can sometimes be really difficult.
Yeah. Even as those things happen and have you questioning or doubting yourself, there are often many other factors contributing to something not being able to happen. And sometimes it's difficult to reconcile that as you're moving through it. But when you're passionate about the work and committed to whatever change you're hoping to see, as there are hurdles or roadblocks, it definitely starts to just eat away at you.
I think even I might have talked about this at some point, but I never want anyone who decides to leave the field for whatever reason to feel bad about it. I think, if you need to go pay your rent or you decide you want to take a lot of expensive vacations and this industry isn't doing it for you, there are other ways to make music and the arts part of your life outside of working with it. So it's never a thing that you have to completely leave. I know plenty of people who have come into the industry later after doing other things. I know people that have left the industry for whatever reason, but it's always there in different capacities.
Thank you for making that point because I can totally see how it would be like, oh, I'm making a very difficult choice by leaving. And will I be welcome back? And what does it mean after so much time? The only way I can work in creative spaces is to have a formal job. And what I hear you saying is that that's not the case. So I'm glad you said that. It's not always said. Okay, so just to go back really quickly, you mentioned working at the Kennedy Center and Houston Grand Opera. What show or experience were you directly involved in that maybe some of our listeners might be familiar with? And what was exciting about it?
If you were at the Kennedy Center around 2019, you'll know that the Kennedy Center opened an expansion space that was pretty monumental. New spaces, outdoor areas for performance, for process, conference spaces. It was a lot of work, beautiful buildings, but we had I think it was 18-day festival to celebrate the opening. So it was day-long activities every day. I think I was directly involved in 8 of them.
Oh, whoa.
Yeah, because of the nature of my job at that time, working with the opera, the symphony, hip hop, the chamber music, we had an education day. So working with all of those departments, just being able to make choices about programming, make choices about the content. Exhausted after it was done. But I have a colleague down in Houston who I worked with in DC at the opera. We had a chat a couple weeks ago about that festival and again, how exhausting it was, but just big and amazing. And again, a way that we had people coming from all over the world. We had native Washingtonians who had never been to that part of town coming, and we could talk to them about all the things the Kennedy Center does. They could see it, and it was free, it was public. So it was a really powerful event, and I'm still so proud of it.
It's amazing. That's amazing.
It was
a full experience from the design, the thinking of it, to it's coming to fruition, to actually seeing the audience members experience it or the attendees experience it.
Definitely too. I was involved with it. There were people who were involved with it much longer, but it was 2 years just getting up to that point. So sometimes you forget it when something else happens and you're like, oh, I did this thing wrong. It's like, girl, hush.
Remember, because I just heard you say whether I was working with the symphony, opera, hip hop, those are 3 different genres, and not everybody could work in all different genres, right? Because if you're trained in one, maybe that is the area that you know most. But help me understand how you know all 3, because that is a flex. I just have to say.
Yeah, I think it's one, jack of all trades, master of none, being okay with admitting I don't know everything about everything. But it was a lot of listening. It was different growing up where I would hear the things my mom would hear. I would hear the things my brother listened to or other family members. So I was exposed to a lot of different music. I was listening to all of those art forms. I was listening to jazz. I was listening to the blues because we're down here in Houston and, chopped and screwed music and just everything. So it was really all in my head. And then going into music school for college, you learn that there are a lot of basics to music in general, whether it's Western music, whether it's, music from other continents. There are things that people do. People come together to make community with music. People have music for ritual. People use different types of instruments. You either strum it, tap it, blow into it. It's not that different. I feel like having that foundation and then listening to everything I could helped me develop an appreciation for so many things, because so many artists doing totally different things, doing it so beautifully, integrating other disciplines into it, multiple types of music. There's just so much possible, and it's always really interesting to see how creative people are. So I think that's why. And I've worked in a few positions that involve one genre, classical music, or when I worked in early music. For those that don't know, that's the really, really old music. It's music before 1750. And I'm talking about also like medieval music.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
But again, same thing, strum, blow, sing, beat.
I like that you bring it back to that. There are different influences, but at the end of the day,
It's the same. It's just a different era, different country, different artist and practitioners.
I imagine you have to get creative when thinking about what it looks like to engage those varied communities. Something that works in the hip hop space might not work in symphony. Or maybe you want to try something that you've done in the symphony space in hip hop. What are some of the creative ways that you have worked to engage the community?
I'll give an example. When I was programming for young audiences doing a music series, field trips are always the symphony, it's always classical music, a few genres. But I decided one of the things for our music series, being in DC, needs to be a go-go concert.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that is DC's music. The artists we have that are in DC are amazing, and they think of themselves as music educators. They want to show a young audience what they do. He didn't end up getting programmed while I was there, but I know they programmed him afterwards. It was a Zydeco artist. So again, introducing schools and teachers and families saying, hey, we got this really cool thing happening. Come check it out. It's really fun. Working with Mo Willems and working with Jacqueline Woodson through the work with the center allowed me and our team to have a symphony commissioned inspired by a book by Mo, or Jacqueline had a book, Each Kindness. I thought it would be a good project for this group called Rootstock Republic, now known as Wondersmith Entertainment, a collective of musicians, the two creators actually went to Peabody with, conservatory with, who are now they're out in these streets. I just saw that they did something. They're doing stuff at the Grammys. They're going on SNL. They're part of the orchestra for Black Panther and all these amazing things. Juneteenth at the Hollywood Bowl. They're really doing it. So being able to bring them in as these artists who are classically trained, but so diverse in what they're doing, and create this piece with Jacqueline Woodson, very popular author, very popular young audiences author. Being able to bridge those worlds, you're getting a really, again, powerful way to bring people into the space who may have never come there.
Jennifer, when you think about your legacy or what you hope happens because you did the work that you do, what is that? What do you hope you leave the world with?
Yeah, I think that now as I have reached my auntie Moo era life. I love it. I love a good moo. I don't know about y'all, but I do. And I think about my pathway, and I think about how circuitous it's been, and those moments when I doubted myself, when I thought I wasn't good enough, in the midst of moments where I was able to experience different things or meet amazing people or hear great art. It's become really important to me over the last several years to make sure that people coming in behind me get all of the love, support, and the advice they need, whether they are continuing to be performers, whether they want to be administrators, even whether or not they want to leave the field and feel like that's a failure. I always tell people I feel like I'm a big cheerleader for folks who work in this field, particularly Black and brown women, because it's also a hard industry for us. So I want to make sure they feel supported. I'm the one sending texts or Instagram messages when someone does something amazing, like, yes, 10 exclamation points, to make sure they know that what they're doing is amazing or what they're doing deserves recognition. So to me, that's important to keep going. They come back to me or send me updates on what they're doing. I feel like even if it's only a tiny contribution, I'm so happy I got to encourage that person to, walk in their greatness.
That's truly auntie phase. That's when you're giving back, when you're pouring out into people, helping them navigate those paths that you once navigated. And what a joy and honor to be able to be in this space and to be able to reflect on those things that worked towards your favor and those things that maybe didn't work out the way that you hoped. I really appreciate your vulnerability and honesty about self-doubt and shame and all of those things that are natural and natural to be spoken about because it's just a part of life. I think that is so helpful. And when I think about our listeners who may be listening because they're just interested in creative careers, or maybe they're interested in working in careers that are creative, I think that the journey can be so unpredictable. If you lean with the flow, you never know how it'll end up. What's one thing, and this is my last question, I swear. What's one thing you wish people knew about your work that they just wouldn't know unless you mentioned it?
It's a really good question. I would say my work and the work of the industry, that it isn't fluff. There are people behind the scenes. There was an opera we did last season. 100 people ended up being on stage during the show, but 800 people had worked on it, different capacities to get on stage. And that's from the team that designed the set in the UK to the ship that went through a hurricane and a whale attack to get to the folks who, sets and lights and building and design, like all of those people. They're people who are craftsmen, designers, administrators, finance people, costume designers, wig and makeup specialists. These people take their craft very seriously so that people can come in and have this experience that sometimes can be life-altering. I know it's been that way sometimes for me. Compared to other fields, there's a feeling that the work in arts and culture is somehow unimportant. But we have all the figures that are like, if the babies don't have the arts in school, they don't come to school. Like they're better engaged, they're learning science and math. I feel like it's a broken record to have to continue to say that, but it enriches people's lives regardless of how they connect with it. I really hope people understand that there are a lot of people who are very skilled, very smart, brilliant in this work and making it possible for whether it's a tiny audience or a huge audience to be a part of it.
That's right. Amen. Arts and culture should not be a privilege. Access to arts and culture shouldn't be a privilege. It invites you to think broadly, to be creative in the way you approach tasks. There's so many benefits. And so as I think about at the end of a film and you see the credits rolling, you see that it's never just one or two people or just the people you see on the screen. There's so many more people. And so thank you for lifting those names up and those roles up. That's the point of this podcast. Let's give you all your flowers for the incredible impact that you've made. And so as we wrap up, how can the people stay in touch with you? Where do they follow you or your work?
Yeah, so the easiest thing you can do, I'm on Instagram at Jenbo, Jenbo 1980. So I'm always happy to get a new follow and to communicate. And, always check out HoustonGrandOpera.org. There's information about our education and community programs, but also about all the wonderful performances that we're doing out in the community. I love to find out what other people are doing in the arts, so please feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much. And we're so glad that your work is being experienced by audiences around the world. All right, everybody. We'll see you next time. Thank you for tuning in to Cultural Catalyst. If you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe to the podcast and follow us for more inspiring stories from the world of arts and entertainment. You can find me on social media at MCE Arts and Alison T. McNeil on LinkedIn. Please leave a review and tune in to our next episode for more creatives behind the curtain. See you next time.